The moment my mother snarled those words at my 8-year-old daughter, the entire room froze. "You're not my real granddaughter anyway, you don't belong here. Get out." Emma's little face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks as she looked at me in confusion and heartbreak. 20 pairs of eyes turned to watch my reaction. I grabbed my daughter's hand, walked out without a word, and drove home in silent fury. While Emma sobbed in her bedroom, I sent one text message that would change everything. "Handle them all." By morning, my phone showed 55 missed calls from my mother, her final voicemail begging, "Grace, please don't do this, please." My response was simple: "You'd better start praying." I never thought I'd become the person who would systematically dismantle her own family's foundation. But then again, I never thought my mother would reject her own granddaughter in front of our entire extended family on Christmas Eve. I'm Grace Thompson, 34 years old, a corporate attorney specializing in mergers and acquisitions at one of Boston's top firms. My entire life has been a carefully choreographed performance to earn my mother Patricia's approval. Growing up in Wellesley, Massachusetts, in a sprawling colonial home with perfectly manicured gardens, I learned early that appearance and status were the Thompson family currencies. My father, Richard, built his wealth through real estate development, while my mother managed their social standing with military precision. Our family photos displayed on the grand staircase told the story. They wanted the world to see perfectly dressed children, vacation homes in Nantucket and Aspen, charity gala appearances, and not a hair out of place. What those photos didn't show were the tears shed when we didn't meet expectations, the constant pressure to achieve, and the withdrawal of affection as punishment for perceived failures. My brother Tyler and I responded differently to our upbringing. He embraced it, becoming the golden child, who followed in our father's footsteps, entering the family business and marrying Charlotte, a woman who might as well have been handpicked by Patricia for her social connections and old money. Background: I rebelled in my own way, not through obvious defiance, but by choosing law instead of the family business, though I still found myself desperately seeking my mother's approval in everything I did. When I met Mark at a legal conference in Chicago 7 years ago, I was initially drawn to how different he was from my family. Warm, genuine, and completely unconcerned with status symbols, he saw through my carefully constructed professional facade immediately. "You're trying so hard to be perfect," he told me on our third date. "I'd rather get to know the real you." I married him 11 months later against my mother's thinly veiled disapproval. Mark's family owned a moderately successful construction company in Wisconsin, respectable but not prestigious enough for Patricia Thompson. We tried for 3 years to have a biological child. 3 miscarriages later, I was emotionally drained and Mark suggested we consider adoption. The moment we met Emma at the foster care center, I knew she was meant to be our daughter. At 5 years old, with solemn brown eyes and a hesitant smile, she had already endured more hardship than most adults. Her birther had struggled with addiction, and Emma had bounced between foster homes since she was 2. When she cautiously asked if we would be her forever family, I made a promise I intended to keep at all costs. The adoption process was lengthy and sometimes heartbreaking, but 18 months later, Emma officially became our daughter. The joy I felt when the judge finalized our family couldn't be dimmed, not even by my mother's reaction. "She seems nice," Patricia said at our first family dinner with Emma, her tone suggesting the opposite. "Of course, it's very charitable of you to take in someone else's child." I corrected her immediately. "She's not someone else's child, Mom. She's our daughter." Patricia smiled tightly. "Of course, dear. I just mean it's not quite the same as having your own, is it? Blood connections matter." Those subtle digs continued over the 3 years Emma was part of our family. Patricia never outright rejected her, but she made distinctions constantly, giving Tyler's biological children more expensive gifts, referring to Emma as Grace's adopted daughter rather than simply her granddaughter, and making comments about how Emma didn't look like a Thompson. I confronted my mother several times, but she always deflected. "You're being oversensitive, Grace." "Of course I accept her. I'm just being realistic about the situation." Mark wanted to limit Emma's exposure to my parents, but I kept hoping Patricia would come around. "She's my mother," I explained. "Eventually she'll see how amazing Emma is, and it won't matter how she came to us." What I hadn't told Mark was that my parents' approval carried financial implications too. My grandparents had established a substantial family trust decades ago, which my parents now controlled as trustees. Every member of the extended Thompson family benefited from this arrangement. College educations, down payments for homes, business investments, all flowed from the trust with my parents' approval. It gave them enormous power over everyone's lives, which explained why no one ever challenged Patricia's behavior, no matter how cruel or controlling. My closest friend Alison saw through the dynamic immediately. We'd been roommates at Yale and she now worked in digital security for a major tech company. Unlike my family friends who were impressed by my parents' wealth and status, Alison saw them clearly. "They're using money to control you, Grace," she told me after witnessing a particularly tense family dinner. "That's not love, it's manipulation." I defended my parents out of habit, but Alison's words lingered. She was the only person outside my marriage who knew how deeply I struggled with my parents' conditional affection. "If they ever cross a line with Emma, you call me," she said. "I've got skills that could come in handy." I laughed it off, then thinking she was joking. I should have taken her more seriously because the line wasn't just crossed at that Christmas gathering. It was obliterated in the cruelest way possible. The annual Thompson family Christmas Eve celebration was a tradition that resembled a society event more than a family gathering. Hosted at my parents' estate, it brought together extended family business associates and carefully selected friends, about 50 people in total, all dressed in holiday finery that would have suited a spread in architectural daist. This particular Christmas Eve, I felt the tension the moment we arrived. Emma wore the emerald green velvet dress we had carefully selected together, her hair styled in neat braids tied with matching ribbons. "You look beautiful," I told her as Mark parked our car in the circular driveway. "Remember, if you get overwhelmed, just find me or Daddy, okay?" Emma nodded solemnly. At 8 years old, she had already learned to navigate the complex waters of Thompson family gatherings, sticking close to her cousins Jackson and Lily Tyler's children, who were 9 and 6 respectively. "Will Grandma like my dress?" she asked, smoothing the velvet nervously. The question broke my heart a little. Despite 3 years in our family, Emma still worked overtime to earn my mother's approval. "Shell," I said, hoping it wasn't a lie. The house was decorated impeccably as always. A 50-newt Christmas tree in the foyer, professionally decorated in golden cream, garlands on the sweeping staircase, and enough twinkling lights to rival a department store display. The scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air, mixing with the expensive perfumes of the guests. My mother greeted us at the door, elegant in a tailored red dress that probably cost more than some people's monthly rent. "Grace, Mark, you're finally here," she said, air-kissing my cheeks. Her gaze dropped to Emma and I felt my daughter shrink slightly beside me. "Hello, Emma, the other children are in the game room." No hug for her granddaughter, no comment on her dress, just a dismissal to the children's area. I squeezed Emma's shoulder reassuringly before she went to find her cousins. "Mom, could you try a little harder with Emma?" I whispered as we moved into the grand living room. "She spent an hour getting ready, hopping you'd notice." Patricia sighed. "Grace, I'm hosting 50 people tonight. I don't have time for this discussion again." The evening progressed with the usual carefully orchestrated socializing. I kept one eye on Emma, who was playing with her cousins but glancing frequently toward my mother, still seeking that elusive approval. My brother Tyler approached with his wife Charlotte, both holding crystal glasses of champagne. "Relax," Grace Tyler said, noticing my tension. "It's Christmas, try to enjoy yourself." "I'd enjoy myself more if Mom would acknowledge her granddaughter properly," I replied. Tyler exchanged glances with Charlotte. "You know how Mom is, she's traditional, it takes time. It's been 3 years, Tyler." He shrugged. "Maybe if you'd had your own kids too." "Emma is my own kid." I cut him off sharply. Charlotte touched my arm in what was meant to be a conciliatory gesture. "What Tyler means is that Mom and Dad come from a different generation. They see family differently." I bit back a retort as I spotted Emma approaching with Jackson and Lily. The children were laughing about something momentarily carefree. Throughout the evening, I noticed Patricia's behavior toward Emma growing increasingly cold. When gifts were distributed, Emma's package was noticeably smaller than what the other grandchildren received. When family photos were taken, Patricia positioned Emma at the edge almost as an afterthought. Each slight was subtle enough that only someone paying close attention would notice, but I saw Emma's smile fade a little more each time. While the children were playing and the adults were mingling before dinner, I cornered my mother in the kitchen where the catering staff was preparing to serve. "Mom, we need to talk about how you're treating Emma." Patricia busied herself adjusting a flower arrangement. "I don't know what you mean. The smaller gift, the photo arrangement, the way you barely acknowledge her presence. She notices, Mom. She's a child, but she's not blind." My mother sighed dramatically. "Grace, I'm trying, but you have to understand this isn't easy for me. Adoption isn't natural. You're asking me to feel the same about a child with no biological connection to our family as I do about my actual grandchildren." "She is your actual granddaughter," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "The law recognizes it, our family recognizes it, and if you'd open your heart for 2 seconds you'd see what an amazing child she is." "Lower your voice," Patricia hissed. "We have guests. I don't care about the guests. I care about my daughter feeling unwelcome in her own family." Patricia straightened her spine, her expression hardening. "I've done everything I can to accommodate your choice. But you can't force me to feel something I don't." I was about to respond when one of the caterers announced that dinner was ready to be served. Patricia brushed past me, the conversation clearly over in her mind. The dining room was spectacular as always. The long table gleamed with fine china, crystal and silver, a centerpiece of white roses and evergreens running its length. Name cards placed everyone strategically. My parents at each end with the most important guests nearest them. Our family was seated in the middle section with Emma between Mark and me. Dinner began smoothly enough with servers presenting course after elegant course. Emma was on her best behavior, carefully using the correct forks and remembering to put her napkin in her lap, just as we had practiced. The disaster happened during the main course. The server was placing a plate of turkey and accompaniment in front of Emma when my nephew Jackson said something that made her laugh. As she turned toward him, her elbow bumped the server's arm. The plate tilted, sending cranberry sauce sliding across the table and onto my mother's cream-colored lace tablecloth, an heirloom piece she prized above almost anything. The bright red stain spread quickly across the delicate fabric. The conversation at the table stuttered to a halt. "I'm sorry, Grandma," Emma said immediately, her voice small and frightened. "It was an accident." For a moment there was only the sound of classical Christmas music playing softly in the background. Then Patricia's face contorted with a rage I'd rarely seen even growing up under her critical eye. "Look what you've done," she snapped, standing so abruptly her chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "This tablecloth is over 100 years old. It's irreplaceable." "Mom, it was an accident," I began, but Patricia wasn't listening. "Every time you come into this house something goes wrong," she continued, glaring at Emma, whose eyes were filling with tears. "You don't know how to behave properly because you weren't raised properly." The table had gone completely silent now. All 24 dinner guests frozen in place, watching the scene unfold. Mark put a protective arm around Emma's shoulders. "Patricia, that's enough," my father said quietly, but she was beyond being calmed. "I have tried to accept this situation for 3 years," Patricia said, her voice rising. "I've tried to pretend that this arrangement is normal, but I can't do it anymore." She pointed a manicured finger directly at Emma. "You're not my real granddaughter anyway. You don't belong here, get out." Emma burst into tears, her small body shaking with sobs. The look of utter betrayal and confusion on her face will haunt me for the rest of my life. In the frozen moment after my mother's outburst, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The desperate need for Patricia's approval that had driven me my entire life vanished, replaced by a cold, protective fury I'd never experienced before. I stood slowly, placing my napkin on the table with deliberate care. "We're leaving," I said, my voice unnaturally calm. I helped Emma from her chair as Mark stood beside us, his face rigid with anger. "Grace, sit down. You're making a scene," my father ordered from the end of the table. I looked at him directly. "Did you hear what your wife just said to my 8-year-old daughter?" He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Patricia is upset about the tablecloth. She didn't mean it." "She meant every word," I replied. "And you know it." My brother Tyler half rose from his seat. "Grace, come on, let's all calm down. It's Christmas Eve." I turned to the table at large, taking in the uncomfortable expressions, the averted eyes, the silence from people who had watched a child be verbally assaulted and did nothing. Merry Christmas to all of you, I said quietly. Enjoy your dinner. With that, I took Emma's hand and the three of us walked out. No one called after us. No one followed. The sound of resumed dinner conversation drifted out as we retrieved our coats and left through the grand front door. In the car, Emma's sobs were heart-wrenching. Why doesn't Grandma love me, Mommy? What did I do wrong? I turned in my seat to look at her, this child who had already faced so much rejection in her short life. You did absolutely nothing wrong, sweetheart, nothing, but she said, I'm not real family. Emma's voice cracked. Is it because I'm adopted? Mark caught my eye in the rearview mirror, his expression pained. Emma, listen to me, I said firmly. Family isn't about who gave birth to who, it's about love. Your daddy and I chose you because we love you more than anything in the world. Some people like Grandma don't understand that. Will she ever love me? Emma asked in a small voice. I couldn't bring myself to lie to her. I don't know, honey, but that's her loss, not yours. The 20-a-nut drive home passed in relative quiet, broken only by Emma's occasional sniffles. Our house looked warm and welcoming. When we pulled into the driveway, the multicolored Christmas lights we'd strung along the porch, twinkling in the darkness. Inside, our own Christmas tree stood in the living room, decorated with the handmade ornaments Emma had created in school and the eclectic collection Mark and I had gathered over the years. How about some hot chocolate? Mark suggested, trying to salvage something of the evening. Emma nodded listlessly. While Mark went to the kitchen, I helped Emma change into her pajamas, her little body still occasionally shuddering with suppressed sobs. Can I sleep in your room tonight? She asked as I tucked her into our bed. Of course you can, sweetheart. I sat beside her, stroking her hair until her eyes grew heavy. Tomorrow will be better, I promise. Santa's still coming. I don't care about presents, she murmured, already half asleep. I just want everyone to be happy. My heart broke all over again. Here was this child who had just been rejected, worrying about everyone else's happiness. I kissed her forehead and stayed until her breathing evened out in sleep. When I went downstairs, Mark was waiting with 2 glasses of wine. The hot chocolate for Emma sat untouched on the counter. She fell asleep, I explained, accepting the glass gratefully. What are we going to do? Grace, Mark asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. I don't want Emma anywhere near your mother after this. Neither do I. I took a long sip of wine. Mark, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you about limiting contact with my parents. I just kept hopping. That's what makes you a good person, he said gently. You keep seeing the potential for good in people even when they disappoint you. Repeatedly, he took my hand. But this time we have to protect Emma above all else. I know, I squeezed his hand. The problem is cutting my parents off means cutting off the entire extended family. You know how everyone revolves around them because of the trust money. Mark grimaced. Your family's relationship with money is toxic. Grace has been since I met you. He wasn't wrong. My parents had used their control of the family trust as a leash on everyone for decades. No one challenged them because no one wanted to risk their financial support. I had maintained a degree of independence by building my own career, but even I had benefited from trust distributions over the years. I need to call Ryan, I said suddenly. Mark looked surprised. Ryan Miller from law school. Why? I hesitated, then decided Mark needed to know everything. Remember about 2 years ago when there were those rumors about Dad using undocumented workers on his development projects? Mark nodded. The investigation was dropped, right? It was. But before it was, I started gathering information just in case. Mark's eyebrows rose. What kind of information? Financial records, tax documents, evidence of questionable business practices. I took a deep breath. My father hasn't just been cutting corners with labor. He's been systematically evading taxes and hiding assets for years, and my mother knows about all of it. Mark stared at me. And you've kept this information all this time? Why? Insurance, I said simply. I never thought I'd actually use it. I just needed to know I could protect myself and you and Emma if things ever got really bad. And now they have, Mark said, understanding dawning in his eyes. Ryan runs a private investigation firm now. He's been holding some of the documentation for me. I pulled out my phone. I need to call him. It's Christmas Eve, Grace. I looked at the time. Just past 9:00 p.m. He doesn't celebrate Christmas and he owes me a favor. Ryan answered on the 3rd ring. After brief explanations, I texted him 3 words, handle them all. His response came immediately. Are you sure? No, going back, I thought of Emma's tears of 3 years of subtle rejection culminating in that public humiliation. I'm sure by the time I hung up, my phone was already buzzing with incoming calls from my parents. I silenced it without answering. By morning there were 55 missed calls and numerous voicemails, each more desperate than the last. The final one left at 4:00 a.m. featured my mother's voice uncharacteristically shaky. "Grace, please don't do this. Please, whatever you think you're doing, we can talk about it. Call me back." I texted her one line: "You'd better start praying." Mark left for Europe on the 26th for an unavoidable business trip he'd already delayed once. He wanted to cancel again, but I insisted he go. "Emma and I will be fine," I assured him. "This is something I need to handle myself anyway." After he left, I finally allowed myself to break down sobbing in the shower where Emma couldn't hear me. For so long, I'd maintained the fantasy that my mother could change, that she could learn to love Emma as her true granddaughter. That delusion had cost my daughter pain she didn't deserve. Now I was prepared to bring the entire Thompson family empire crashing down, if that's what it took to teach them all a lesson about what real family means. The day after Christmas, while Emma was having a play date with her friend Madison from down the street, I met Ryan at his office downtown. The private investigation firm he ran occupied the entire 12th floor of a sleek glass building, a far cry from the cramped apartment we'd shared during our second year of law school. "You look terrible," he said bluntly as I entered his office. "Merry Christmas to you too," I replied, dropping into the chair opposite his desk. Ryan pushed a cup of coffee toward me. "Tell me everything." I recounted the previous night's events, watching Ryan's expression darken. We'd remained close friends after graduation, and he'd met Emma several times, developing a fondness for her quick wit and resilient spirit. "Your mother actually said that in front of everyone?" he asked when I finished. I nodded, and not a single person stood up for Emma, not one. Ryan leaned forward, clasping his hands on the desk. "Then they all deserve what's coming. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this? It will get ugly, Grace, I'm certain." I pulled a flash drive from my purse and placed it on the desk between us. "This has everything. Banking records, tax documents, emails, records of offshore accounts. My father has been evading taxes on millions for at least the past decade. My mother has been complicit, signing joint returns and helping hide assets." Ryan picked up the drive. "How did you get all this?" "Carefully over time. Dad's never been particularly tech-savvy. Neither has Mom. They trust their accountant and their attorney, both of whom are sloppy with security." I took a sip of coffee. "Plus, I'm a corporate attorney who specializes in finding financial improprieties during mergers and acquisitions. This is literally what I do professionally." Ryan nodded slowly. "And what exactly do you want to happen?" "I want them to understand they're not untouchable. I want the entire family to see that their empire is built on sand." I met Ryan's eyes steadily. "I want them to feel powerless the way they made Emma feel." "Scorched earth," Ryan said. "It wasn't a question." "Exactly." Ryan inserted the flash drive into his computer and began scanning through files. After several minutes of silence, he whistled low. "This is comprehensive. Your father could actually face criminal charges with this evidence." I know my voice was flat. "And the family trust? What happens to that?" "I've been reviewing the trust documents. There's a morality clause." A mirthless smile crossed my face. "Ironic, isn't it? My grandfather insisted on including language that the trustees could be removed for moral turpitude or criminal activity. Tax evasion definitely qualifies." Ryan leaned back in his chair. "So who controls the trust if your parents are removed?" "It would pass to the eldest child. That would be me." The weight of what I was doing hit me fully then. "I'm not doing this for the money, Ryan. I know you're not, but it gives you leverage." He tapped his fingers thoughtfully against the desk. "We need to be strategic about this anonymous tip to the IRS first. Then once that investigation is underway, we can use the other evidence as needed." For the next 2 hours, Ryan and I mapped out a comprehensive plan. The IRS tip would go out immediately. Simultaneously, evidence of Richard's labor violations would find its way to the Department of Labor. Documentation of improper political donations would be sent to the appropriate regulatory bodies. "What about your brother, Ryan?" asked as we finalized the timeline. I hesitated. "Tyler has always followed my father's lead. I want to give him a chance to choose differently, and if he doesn't, then he faces the consequences too. After leaving Ryan's office, I met Alison for lunch at a quiet restaurant where we wouldn't be overheard. Her expertise in digital security would be invaluable. I need to make sure my own digital footprint is clean, I explained after bringing her up to speed. I can't have this blowing back on me or Emma. Alison's expression was grim. I've been telling you for years your parents are toxic, but this is beyond even what I imagined. Of course, I'll help. She pulled out her laptop. Let me secure your accounts first, then we'll work on creating some distance between you and what's about to happen. By the end of our meeting, my digital presence was locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Alison had also helped me secure new accounts that couldn't be traced to me for ongoing communications related to the plan. What about your work? She asked as we prepared to leave. Could there be blowback there? I'd thought about this carefully. I've already spoken to the managing partner. I told him there may be some family issues coming to light that could potentially become public. He assured me the firm stands behind me. It helped that I was one of the top billing attorneys and had recently brought in 3 major clients. The firm would protect its assets, and currently I was one of them. My next step was meeting with Tyler. I arranged to see him for coffee at a neutral location away from both our parents and his wife, who reported everything back to Patricia. Tyler looked uncomfortable when he arrived at the coffee shop. At 36, he strongly resembled our father, tall with the same strong jawline and calculating eyes. He'd always played by the rules our parents established, and it had served him well. "What's this about, Grace?" he asked after ordering his usual black coffee. "Mom and Dad are frantic trying to reach you." "I know," I stirred my latte calmly. "They should be," Tyler's brow furrowed. "Look, I get that Mom was out of line at Christmas, but isn't this silent treatment a bit dramatic?" "Emma's fine, right?" The casual dismissal of Emma's pain made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral. "Emma is recovering from being publicly humiliated and rejected by her grandmother. So no, she's not fine." Tyler had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "Mom feels terrible. She lost her temper." "This wasn't about temper, Tyler. This was about 3 years of Mom making it clear that Emma isn't really family in her eyes." I leaned forward. "And you know it. You've watched it happen and said nothing." "What was I supposed to say?" he protested. "You know how Mom is when she gets an idea in her head. You were supposed to stand up for your niece," I replied evenly. "But that's not why I asked you here. I want to give you a chance to choose a side before things get messy." Tyler's expression shifted from discomfort to weariness. "What are you talking about? What things?" "Dad's business practices are about to come under scrutiny. Serious scrutiny." Color drained from my brother's face. "What did you do?" "What I should have done years ago. I'm holding them accountable." I took a sip of my latte. "The question is, where do you stand?" Tyler glanced around nervously, then lowered his voice. "Are you insane? Do you have any idea what you're messing with? Dad will destroy you." "No, he won't, because I have evidence, Tyler, lots of it." I paused, watching realization dawn on his face, including evidence about your activities. Tyler went completely still. "What activities?" "The $200,000 you've been skimming annually from the Westridge Development Project. The false invoices, the phantom contractors." I kept my voice conversational as if discussing the weather. "Dad knows, by the way, he's been covering for you." My brother's face had taken on a greyish tinge. "How did you? It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is what you're going to do now." I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine, a gesture of unexpected gentleness. "Tyler, this isn't just about money or business. This is about a child, your niece, who was rejected by her own family. Don't you think that matters more than preserving Dad's empire?" Tyler withdrew his hand, his expression hardening. "You're making a huge mistake, Grace. When Dad finds out what you're doing, he already suspects." I interrupted. "Why do you think Mom's been calling non-stop? They know something's happening. They just don't know what yet." I stood gathering my coat and purse. "Think carefully about whose side you want to be on when everything comes to light, because I promise you, Tyler, there will be no middle ground." As I walked away, Tyler called after me. "You'll regret this, Grace. You're throwing away everything our family has built." I turned back briefly. "No, Tyler. I'm protecting my real family, my husband and my daughter, something you might want to consider doing yourself." The next morning, I received confirmation from Ryan that the anonymous tips had been delivered. By noon, my father was calling my office directly, something he never did. I let it go to voicemail. His message was brief. "Whatever you think you're doing, stop it now. We need to talk," I texted back. "Nothing to talk about. You should have taught Mom better manners." Within hours, the first ripples were visible. A client of my father's called to ask if I knew anything about IRS agents requesting records related to Thompson development. I professed complete ignorance while feeling a grim satisfaction. That evening, as Emma and I were making dinner together, my phone buzzed with an incoming text from Allison. "It's working. TD stock down 8% on rumors of investigation." The strategic dismantling of my parents' carefully constructed world had begun. The question now was how they would respond when they realized just how vulnerable they truly were. 3 days after Christmas, the initial shock waves of my plan were reverberating through the Thompson family. My parents' bank accounts had been temporarily frozen pending the IRS investigation, standard procedure, but devastating to people accustomed to unlimited financial access. My father's company was facing inquiries from multiple regulatory agencies, and rumors were spreading through their social circle. Emma had largely bounced back from the Christmas disaster. Resilient as always, we'd created a bubble of normally at home, baking cookies, watching movies, and playing with her new toys. I'd arranged for her to start seeing a child psychologist after New Year's to help process her feelings of rejection. But for now, she seemed content with the simplified explanation that Grandma had been very mean, and we wouldn't be seeing her for a while. Mark called daily from Europe, concerned about both Emma and the escalating situation with my parents. "The company lawyers are getting nervous," he told me during our evening video chat. "They've heard rumors about Richard Thompson being investigated and they know you're his daughter." "Let them be nervous," I replied. "Everything I'm doing is completely legal." Mark lowered his voice, though he was alone in his hotel room. "Triggering federal investigations against your own parents might be legal, Grace, but it's not exactly going to win you friends in corporate America." I sighed, feeling the weight of what I'd set in motion. "I know, but they crossed a line, Mark. They hurt our daughter." His expression softened. "I know, and I support you completely. I just want you to be prepared for all the consequences, not just the ones you're aiming for." After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room, contemplating how quickly life can change. A week ago, I had been preparing for a traditional family Christmas, still harboring hope that my mother would fully accept Emma. Now I was orchestrating the systematic dismantling of my family's financial and social standing. My phone chimed with a text from Ryan. "You should know your father has hired Blackwater Security Group. They specialize in corporate counterintelligence." I wasn't surprised. Richard Thompson would use every resource at his disposal to identify who was behind the attacks on his empire. What he wouldn't expect was that the threat came from within his own family. The next morning, I dropped Emma to friend's house for a played date and headed to the office, maintaining the appearance of normal routine. I'd been there less than an hour when my assistant buzzed me. "Your brother is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." I took a deep breath. "Send him in." Tyler entered my office like a storm, his normally perfectly groomed appearance showing signs of strain. He closed the door firmly behind him. "What the hell have you done?" he demanded without preamble. I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. "Have a seat, Tyler. I don't want to sit. I want you to call off whatever this is." His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "The IRS froze Dad's accounts yesterday. The DOL is investigating labor practices. There's talk of criminal charges, Grace." "I'm aware," I said calmly. "That tends to happen when you break the law for decades." Tyler ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I hadn't seen since we were children. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to Mom? She hasn't slept in days. She's taking anxiety medication." "I'm surprised she can feel anything through all that Botox," I replied coolly. "Did she mention why this is happening? Did she tell you what she said to Emma?" "She told me she lost her temper over a stupid tablecloth." Tyler's voice rose. "This scorched earth campaign is completely disproportionate." I stood slowly, placing my palms flat on my desk. "It wasn't about the tablecloth, Tyler. It was about Mom finally saying out loud what she's been communicating to Emma for 3 years, that she doesn't consider her a real member of this family, that she's an outsider. Do you have any idea what that does to a child who's already experienced abandonment?" Tyler's righteous anger faltered slightly. "She didn't mean it that way." "Yes, she did, and you know it." I circled the desk to stand directly in front of him. I've given you a chance to choose sides, Tyler. Are you here to tell me you're standing with Emma, or are you here to threaten me on behalf of our parents? His expression hardened. I'm here to tell you that if you don't stop this, I'll make sure everyone knows you're behind it. I'll tell the firm's partners, I'll tell your clients. I'll make sure everyone in our circle knows you betrayed your own family. I had anticipated this move. Reaching into my desk drawer, I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Tyler's voice from our coffee shop meeting admitting to embezzlement from his father's company. I recorded our entire conversation, Tyler. Legally, I might add, since Massachusetts is a one-party consent state, I stopped the recording. If you expose me, this goes public. How do you think Dad will react when everyone knows his son has been stealing from him, when the IRS adds this to their investigation? Tyler's face drained of color for the second time in our recent encounters. You wouldn't, I absolutely would. This isn't a game, Tyler. Emma's emotional well-being isn't a bargaining chip. I softened my tone slightly. It doesn't have to be this way. You could stand with me. Help me create a healthier family dynamic where every member is valued, not just the ones with the right DNA. For a moment, something like consideration flickered in my brother's eyes, then his expression closed. You'll regret this, Grace. When you destroy Dad's reputation and business, you destroy your own heritage, your own future. No, Tyler, I'm securing Emma's future, one where she doesn't have to earn love through performance or genetic connection. I returned to my seat. You should go now and think carefully about your next move. After Tyler left, I called Ryan to update him. Tyler threatened to expose me. I countered with the recording of his embezzlement admission. Ryan whistled. Family dynamics at the Thompsons continue to be healthy. I see. Do you think he'll back down temporarily? But he'll look for another angle. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. What's the latest on the investigations? The IRS is moving quickly. They've already subpoenaed records from your father's offshore accounts. Ryan paused. There's something else you should know. Your parents have hired a private investigator to look into who might be feeding information to the authorities. They're getting closer to connecting the dots to you. Let them, I said with more confidence than I felt. They can't prove anything. Don't underestimate them, Grace. People with everything to lose are dangerous. After hanging up, I stared at the family photo on my desk. Mark, Emma and me on a beach in Cape Cod last summer, all smiling in the golden late afternoon light. That was my real family. That was what I was protecting. Mark returned from Europe 2 days later, rushing home from the airport to wrap Emma in a bear hug before pulling me into his arms. I missed you both so much, he murmured against my hair. That night after Emma was asleep, we sat in the kitchen with glasses of wine, bringing Mark fully up to speed on everything that had transpired in his absence. Tyler's definitely a wild card, Mark observed. But your parents are the real threat. Have you spoken to them directly at all? I shook my head. Not yet, I'm letting them stew in uncertainty. Mark took my hand. Grace, eventually you'll need to talk to them. This can't just be about punishment. There has to be a path forward, some way to resolve this that doesn't leave everyone destroyed. They hurt our daughter, Mark. My voice cracked slightly. I can't forgive that. I'm not asking you to forgive. I'm asking you to consider what the endgame looks like. His thumb traced circles on my palm. What do you want the outcome to be? Criminal charges for your father, your mother's public humiliation, complete estrangement from your entire extended family. His questions gave me pause. In the heat of my protective rage, I hadn't thought much beyond making my parents feel the powerlessness they'd inflicted on Emma. I want them to understand what they did was wrong, I said slowly. I want Emma to know that when someone hurts her, we fight back. And yes, I want some form of justice. Mark nodded. Those are all valid. Just remember that once certain bridges are burned, they can't be rebuilt. Make sure you're prepared for all possible outcomes. The next morning brought the complication I'd been dreading. As I was preparing for work, my phone rang with a call from the managing partner at my firm. Leonard Barnes rarely called directly unless something significant was happening. Grace, he began without preamble. I've just had a very uncomfortable conversation with Richard Thompson. He seems to believe you're somehow involved in his current legal troubles. I kept my voice steady. And what did you tell him, Leonard? I told him that you're one of our most valued partners and that his accusations sounded like paranoid conspiracy theories. There was a pause, but I need to know, Grace, is there any truth to what he's saying? I chose my words carefully. My father hurt my daughter deeply, Leonard. I'm taking steps to protect my family. Everything I've done is legal. Another long pause. I see. Well, legally or not, having a partner engaged in a vendetta against a prominent businessman could be problematic for the firm. It's not a vendetta, it's justice. I took a deep breath. Leonard, if the firm feels my personal situation is becoming a liability, I understand, but I won't stop protecting my daughter. To my surprise, Leonard chuckled softly. You know, Grace, I've always admired your backbone. It's what makes you such an effective attorney. Just try to keep the firm out of the crossfire, will you? I'll do my best. After hanging up, I realized I'd been holding my breath. My professional reputation had survived for now, but the pressure was mounting. That afternoon, as I was reviewing documents for a case, my assistant buzzed me again. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson are here to see you. They're quite insistent. My parents had finally decided to confront me directly. I straightened my desk, checked my appearance in the small mirror I kept in my drawer, and took a steadying breath. Send them in. My parents entered my office with the commanding presence they'd always maintained in public, backstraight expressions, controlled designer clothing, impeccable. But I could see the cracks in their facade. My father's complexion had a greyish undertone, and my mother's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her handbag. Grace, my father said, his voice measured but strained. We need to talk, I gestured to the chairs opposite my desk. Please sit. They settled themselves with the rigid posture of people under extreme stress. My mother spoke first, her voice brittle. This has gone far enough. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. I studied them both for a moment. Have I? I'm not sure you understand the point at all. My father leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Grace, be reasonable. The IRS has frozen our accounts. The Labor Department is investigating the company. Our friends are starting to ask questions. If this continues, everything I've built could collapse. That would be unfortunate, I replied evenly. Unfortunate. My mother's voice rose slightly before she controlled it. Is that all you have to say? Your father's reputation. Our financial security, the entire family's well-being is at stake. I folded my hands on my desk. Was Emma's well-being at stake when you publicly humiliated her on Christmas Eve? When you told an 8-year-old child she wasn't really part of the family? When you ordered her to get out of your house, my mother had the grace to look momentarily ashamed before rallying. I lost my temper. It was a mistake. But this scorched earth campaign you're wagging is completely disproportionate. Interesting choice of words. Tyler said the exact same thing. I leaned back in my chair. So let me understand. You think publicly rejecting and traumatizing a child who's already experienced abandonment is a mistake. But holding you accountable for years of emotional abuse and, oh yes, extensive financial crimes is disproportionate. My father's expression darkened. So you admit you're behind the investigations? I admit nothing, but it does seem like karma has finally caught up with you, doesn't it? I maintained steady eye contact. Tell me, Dad, did you really think you could evade taxes on millions of dollars indefinitely? Did you think the offshore accounts would never be discovered? That the shell companies would never be connected to you? A muscle twitched in my father's jaw. You have no proof of any wrongdoing, don't I? The IRS seems to think otherwise. I turned my attention to my mother and you, Mom, signing those joint tax returns year after year. The charitable foundation that somehow never quite makes the donations it claims, the political contributions through third parties. You've been complicit in everything. My mother blanched. How do you know all this? I'm a corporate attorney who specializes in finding financial improprieties during mergers and acquisitions. Did you really think I wouldn't notice what was happening in my own family? I allowed myself a small cold smile. I've been collecting evidence for years. Insurance, I told myself. Something I'd probably never use unless things got really bad. And then they did, my father said quietly. Yes, when Mom decided that my daughter wasn't worthy of basic human dignity, things got really bad. My parents exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. My father cleared his throat. Grace, let's be practical. What do you want? Money, control of certain assets? A public apology to Emma. Tell us and we can negotiate. Sheer audacity of treating this like a business transaction made me laugh. You still don't get it. This isn't a negotiation. This is a reckoning. Be reasonable. My mother snapped, her composure cracking further. Everyone makes mistakes. I said something terrible in the heat of the moment. I admit that. But destroying your father's reputation, putting our family through this public humiliation, it's madness. No, what's madness is treating an innocent child like an unwelcome intruder for 3 years. I countered, feeling my own anger rising. What's madness is building a family dynamic where love is conditional, where status and appearance matter more than kindness and decency. What's madness is using money to control everyone around you while breaking the law to accumulate more than you could ever need. My father stood abruptly, packing to the window and back. Enough, this stops now. I've given you every advantage in life, paid for the best education, opened doors for you. And this is how you repay me, by trying to destroy everything I've built. You built it on sand, Dad, on lies and manipulation and fear. I remained seated, refusing to be intimidated by his physical dominance. And yes, you paid for my education. You gave me material advantages, but at what cost? Constant criticism, conditional love, the message that I was never quite good enough unless I performed to your standards. That's not fair, my mother protested. We wanted the best for you. We pushed you to excel. You pushed me to conform. There's a difference. I stood now, meeting my father's gaze directly. And now you're doing the same thing to Emma, except she's not even worthy of being pushed to conform in your eyes, is she, Mom? She's just permanently excluded because she doesn't have the right DNA. My mother's face crumpled suddenly. Tears welling in her eyes. You don't understand. You can't understand. Something in her voice gave me pause. What don't I understand, Mom? She looked at my father, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was adopted. I've never told anyone, not even Tyler. I sank back into my chair, stunned. What? My parents, your grandparents, adopted me as an infant? My mother's perfectly manicured hands twisted in her lap. They never wanted me to know, but I found the papers when I was 16. When I confronted them, they made me promise never to tell anyone. They said it would complicate the family dynamics, that people might treat me differently if they knew I wasn't really a Spencer by blood. I struggled to process this revelation. So all these years, your rejection of Emma, your insistence on real family being about blood connections, it was because I spent my entire life trying to prove I belonged. My mother said, tears now flowing freely. Because I molded myself into what I thought a real Spencer should be. Because I lived in constant fear that people would discover I was an imposter. My father moved to stand behind my mother's chair, placing his hands on her shoulders in a rare display of public tenderness. Your mother has struggled with this her entire life. Grace, when you adopted Emma, it brought all those old insecurities to the surface. I stared at them both, trying to reconcile this new information with the woman who had rejected my daughter. That explains your behavior, Mom, but it doesn't excuse it. If anything, you should have had more empathy for Emma, not less. My mother wiped at her tears, careful not to smudge her makeup, even in this moment of vulnerability. I know it's twisted and wrong. I've spent so many years burying that part of myself, pretending to be something I'm not. When I look at Emma, so comfortable with her adopted identity, so open about it, it makes me feel ashamed of my own cowardice. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt a flicker of understanding for my mother. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a glimpse of the wounded person behind the perfect facade. Does Emma know about this? My father asked. That her grandmother was adopted too? I shook my head. No, and it wouldn't matter to her. Emma doesn't care about biology. She just wants to be loved. My mother flinched at the implicit criticism. I want to make this right, Grace. Tell me how to make this right. It's not that simple, I replied. You've hurt Emma deeply. And you've created a family culture that values all the wrong things, that can't be fixed with a single apology or a grand gesture, but it can be fixed. The note of desperate hope in my mother's voice was something I'd never heard before. I considered the question carefully. Maybe with time, with consistent change, with professional help, I looked directly at my father and with accountability for everything else. The financial improprieties, the manipulation, the control, my father's expression hardened again. The investigations, you can call them off. No, I can't. That's not how federal investigations work, as you well know. I leaned forward. But I can help mitigate the damage if you're willing to make amends. Legal and personal, what would that entail? His voice was cautious. The businessman evaluating terms, complete financial transparency. Voluntary disclosure of everything the investigators haven't found yet, restitution of unpaid taxes, A restructuring of the family trust to protect everyone, not just those in your favor, I paused. And most importantly, a genuine commitment to change how you relate to Emma, to all of us. My parents exchanged another long look. Finally, my father nodded. We'll need to discuss specifics with attorneys present. Of course, I stood signaling that our meeting was concluding. But understand this, I won't allow Emma to be heard again. Any agreement we reach will have her well-being as the non-negotiable priority. As my parents rose to leave, my mother hesitated, then asked in a small voice, May I speak with Emma, to apologize?" "Not yet," I said firmly. "She's working with a child psychologist to process what happened. When she's ready, if she's ready, I'll let you know." My mother nodded, accepting this boundary with uncharacteristic grace. At the door she turned back. I never meant to become like my adoptive parents, Grace. Somehow I became exactly what I resented in them. After they left, I sat alone in my office, processing the unexpected revelations and the potential path forward. The confrontation had gone differently than I'd anticipated. Instead of righteously bringing my parents to their knees, I'd glimpsed the wounded humanity behind their flawed behavior. I texted Ryan, meeting with parents complete unexpected developments. "Call me." Then I called Mark. "You're not going to believe what just happened," I told him when he answered. "Try me," he replied. "My mother was adopted. She's been hiding it her entire life." Mark's long whistle carried clearly through the phone. "Well, that adds a whole new layer of complexity to this mess, doesn't it? It explains some things, but it doesn't excuse what she did." I swiveled my chair to look out at the Boston skyline. "But for the first time, I can see a path forward that isn't just about destruction. That's good, Grace, for all our sakes, but especially for Emma's. Emma, everything came back to her, my fierce, resilient daughter who deserved a family that valued her completely and unconditionally." "I'm coming home early," I told Mark. "I want to spend the afternoon with you and Emma." "We'll be waiting," he promised. 6 months after that fateful Christmas Eve, our extended family gathered at our home for Emma's 9th birthday party. The setting was deliberately casual. A backyard barbecue with balloons tied to the fence, a homemade birthday cake cooling on the kitchen counter, and Emma's friends from school running through the sprinkler on the warm June afternoon. The Thompson family dynamics had undergone a seismic shift in those 6 months. My father had entered into a voluntary disclosure agreement, with the IRS paying substantial penalties, but avoiding criminal prosecution. The family business had weathered the storm, emerging smaller but more transparent and ethical in its operations, and the family trust had been restructured with me as the primary trustee, ensuring that its benefits would be distributed fairly among all family members. More importantly, my mother had begun the difficult work of confronting her own past and the damage it had caused. Weekly therapy sessions had helped her start processing the shame and insecurity she'd carried since discovering her adopted status as a teenager. She'd even joined a support group for adult adopts, something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. The road to healing with Emma had been tentative and careful. After 2 months of therapy, Emma had agreed to a carefully supervised meeting with her grandmother. Patricia had arrived bearing no gifts at my explicit instruction, just a heartfelt apology and a vulnerability I'd never seen her display before. "I was wrong, Emma," she'd said, simply, her voice trembling. "What I said to you was cruel and untrue. Being family has nothing to do with blood and everything to do with love. I forgot that for a while, but I'm trying to remember now." Emma, with the remarkable capacity for forgiveness that children often possess, had studied her grandmother thoughtfully before asking, "Does this mean you're my real grandma now?" Patricia had nodded, tears spilling over. "If you'll let me be." Emma had considered this, then declared, "You have to be nicer to everyone, not just me." "I'm working on that," Patricia had promised. Now, watching Emma direct her friends in some elaborate game involving the water sprinkler and her collection of action figures, I marveled at her resilience. The child psychologist had helped her process the rejection, reinforcing that the problem lay with her grandmother, not with her. Mark appeared at my side, handing me a glass of lemonade. "Birthday girl seems to be having a blast." "She does." I leaned against his solid presence. Hard to believe how much has changed since Christmas. "For the better," he noted, watching as my father awkwardly attempted to help Tyler man the grill. The two men had their own healing to do after the revelation of Tyler's embezzlement. My brother had agreed to repay the misappropriated funds and had entered a program for gambling addiction, the root cause of his financial misdeeds. My mother approached carrying a tray of cut vegetables. 6 months of inner work had softened her somehow, making her seem more human and less like the perfect society matron she'd always presented to the world. "Is there anything else I can help with?" she asked, the uncertainty in her voice, a reminder of how fundamentally our relationship had changed. "The cake needs frosting," I suggested. Emma requested chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. Patricia smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "I can manage that." As she headed inside, Alison sidled up to us. "Your mother frosting a cake with rainbow sprinkles, never thought it'd see the day." I laughed. "Me neither, the therapy is helping. She's actually talking about going public with her adoption story someday, says it might help others struggling with similar issues. Transformation comes from the most unexpected places sometimes." Alison observed. Ryan arrived then slightly late as usual, carrying an elaborately wrapped gift. "Sorry I'm late." Traffic was a nightmare. He surveyed the relaxed family gathering with approval. "Things seem better." "They are," I confirmed. "Not perfect, but better." Emma spotted Ryan and ran over, dripping water everywhere. "Uncle Ryan, did you bring me a present? Would I show up without one?" He handed over the package with a flourish. "Happy birthday, kiddo." Emma hugged him impulsively, then raced off to add his gift to the growing pile on the patio table. "She called me Uncle Ryan," he said, looking pleased. "You've earned it," Mark told him. "You helped protect her family when she needed it most." My father approached our small group, his demeanor more humble than I'd ever seen it. "Grace, could I have a word?" I excused myself and followed him to a quiet corner of the yard. "I wanted to thank you," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "Not for the investigations or the public embarrassment," he added with a ghost of his old wry humor, "but for forcing me to confront some hard truths about myself and how I've led this family." I nodded, accepting his words. "It wasn't about punishing you, Dad, not really. It was about protecting Emma and creating a family where she could thrive. I understand that now." He looked over at his granddaughter, who was demonstrating some complex gymnastic move to her friends. "She's an extraordinary child. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." "It's not too late," I told him. "That's what I've learned from all this. It's never too late to build something better as long as you're willing to do the work." He squeezed my shoulder awkwardly. Physical affection had never come easily to him and moved away to help Tyler with the burgers. Later, as Emma blew out her candles on the cake, my mother had carefully frosted with chocolate and rainbow sprinkles, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey from that Christmas disaster to this moment of genuine family celebration had been difficult and painful, but necessary. The wish Emma announced after extinguishing all 9 candles in one breath summed it up perfectly. I wished for our family to keep loving each other even when it's hard. Out of the mouth of babes, as they say, that evening after the last guest had departed and Emma was tucked into bed, surrounded by her new presents, Mark and I sat on the back porch swing, watching fireflies rise from the darkening lawn. "You did it," he said quietly. "You protected our daughter and transformed your entire family in the process." "We did it," I corrected him. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." He smiled, pulling me closer. "True, but it was your courage that started it all. The courage to say enough when Emma was hurt, to hold your parents accountable, and then to create a path toward healing when that became possible." I thought about the lessons of the past 6 months. I've learned that sometimes protecting the people you love means taking difficult stands, even against your own family. But I've also learned that real transformation is possible when people are willing to confront their deepest wounds and insecurities. "And what about you?" Mark asked. "How have you changed through all this?" I considered the question carefully. "I think I finally stopped seeking my parents' approval and started focusing on what truly matters, creating a family based on unconditional love rather than performance or status." I leaned my head against his shoulder, and I discovered just how far I'm willing to go to protect our daughter. "Pretty far," he observed with a chuckle. "To the ends of the earth," I confirmed. We sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds of our neighborhood. "Do you think your mother will ever tell the extended family about being adopted?" Mark eventually asked. "I don't know, that's her journey, but I hope she does. Secrets have a way of poisoning relationships across generations, we've seen that firsthand." Mark nodded thoughtfully. The irony is that if she'd been open about her adoption from the beginning, she might have formed a special bond with Emma instead of rejecting her. That's the thing about shame. I said it distorts everything it touches. What should have been a point of connection became a source of division, because she couldn't face her own truth. Emma's birthday celebration marked a turning point in our family's healing process. In the months that followed, we continued building a new foundation based on honesty, accountability, and genuine acceptance. My parents remained in therapy individually and as a couple. Tyler worked on his gambling addiction and slowly rebuilt trust with his wife and children. And Emma blossomed in an environment where she knew without question that she was valued and protected. Her confidence grew along with her natural empathy. The child psychologist noted that despite the trauma of that Christmas rejection, Emma was developing a strong sense of identity and security, largely because she'd seen her parents stand up for her so fiercely. Sometimes, the psychologist explained, what children remember most isn't the hurt itself, but how the adults in their lives responded to it. Emma knows without a doubt that you and Mark will always protect her. That's an incredible gift. 1 year after that devastating Christmas Eve, we hosted the family holiday gathering at our home. It was smaller and less formal than my parents' traditional event. No catered meal or designer decorations, just family potluck dishes and ornaments Emma had made in art class. As we gathered around our somewhat lopsided tree to exchange gifts, I noticed my mother sitting beside Emma, helping her unwrap a present, their heads bent together in shared excitement. The journey wasn't over. Real transformation never is, but we were on a path I could believe in now. A path where family meant unconditional love, not performance or genetic connection. A path where mistakes could be acknowledged and forgiven. A path where Emma could grow up knowing her worth wasn't determined by someone else's limitations, and that more than any revenge or vindication was what I had been fighting for all along. I sometimes think about that text message I sent in the heat of my protective fury. Handle them all. What I didn't realize then was that truly handling a situation like this isn't about destruction, but about reconstruction, building something stronger and more authentic from the broken pieces. That night, as we sat around the fire after Emma had gone to bed, my mother raised her glass in a quiet toast. To family, she said simply, the one we choose and cherish, not the one we're born into or pretend to be. We all drank to that. Have you ever had to take a difficult stand to protect someone you love? What did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find comfort in knowing that family bonds can be healed even after profound hurt. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you all the strength to stand up for what matters most in your own lives. Music.